Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be running through the new features of OOTP 24, what's changed since 23, my overall impression of the game, whether it's worth buying at this point, and where we're going from here pretty much. I'll also go through my plans for the future. I know it's been a really long time since I posted videos. I'm sure you guys were pretty disappointed by the lack of content that I had for 23. This is largely due to schedule extreme busyness, getting started with the next stage of my life. And well, we'll see what happens coming forwards in the following months, but I do intend for MOPS 2.0 to be ready for release in approximately 2 to 3 months, roughly. Not given an exact date at this point, but I'm aiming for a June, July full release of MOPS 2.0. I'm excited for how it's turning out at this point. I think it's going to be a really useful tool. I'm going to try to get it at release to be viable, not just for live starts, but also for historical, very different fictional from live starts, and also for perfect team, possibly. So exciting stuff, and we'll see how it goes. But, anyways, on with the review itself. So for starters, I'm going to go through the things that I can do on opening day, and then I'll swim ahead and cover things that are later on, like the international amateur signing changes and the trade deadline and such. All right, anyways, for starters, I want to cover hard mode. So I don't have this on, and it's actually not an option you can turn on when you're first creating a game, I believe, unless you do challenge mode. So you have to go under AI settings and then enable use hard mode for trading, must submit AI offer to see reaction right here. And what this does is pretty much exactly what it sounds like in the description. You cannot get a trade accepted until you can't see the reaction of another GM. So, for example, Spencer Strider, excellent pitcher in 23. He's certainly one of the better starters out there. You can ask for him for Madison Bumgarner. Obviously, this trade never going to be accepted, but you can't see that from here. You'd have to actually hit the submit offer button in order to see if this is going to go through. Now, on the other hand, if I wanted to do Ketel Marte for Spencer Strider. Now, this obviously is not going to be accepted either, but Ketel Marte is a much greater player, so you don't know how far off this is going to be. What would it take to get this offer to work? Well, the big thing about hard mode to me right now is that you can't really tell how much it's going to take to get a really good player for the most part, but you can still get a good idea of what lesser players are going to be worth, and you can get a good idea of what your own players are worth to the trade AI. And this is through something that I like to use a lot for reference in not hard mode, which is just simply shopping a player around. So we shopped Ketel Marte here. We can see all the options we have available. So we couldn't get Spencer Strider from the Braves, but we could get Ian Anderson. Obviously unlikely to fully develop at this age, but still interesting. We could get Vaughn Grissom, 22-year-old shortstop prospect, certainly an interesting player. Lots of interesting options, as you can see. And obviously, the immediate conclusion here is that yes, trading hard mode does make some things more difficult in OTP. Yes, it does limit your ability to acquire upper tier players. And yes, the biggest thing likely about trading hard mode, in my opinion, is it's much harder to game the AI for every little nickel and dime in every deal that you make, which is something I do. Uh, it's difficult to fiddle around with the trade to see what different options you have. But that said, it's not I wouldn't say it's severely more difficult than not hard mode because you simply shop players around, look for what you need. It doesn't matter who you shop, you can just figure out what the AI values, who they're willing to trade, and then you can make a deal for them. Uh, and yeah, sometimes you'll end up overpaying if you're not careful, but ultimately, I think trading hard mode, great feature. It offers a whole new level of limiting gaming the AI to some extent. You have to kind of go off what you think is fair, but I don't think it's a particularly game changing difficulty thing like I had heard it hyped up as pre release. That said, do think it's good. It's an awesome feature. I appreciate it. Now, the next thing that we're going to discuss here, I'm going to turn off the hard mode for this because not really a reason to have it on going forwards, and it'll be easier to see, is the reputation system. And first thing about this, so basically how it works is you complete a trade, you have this reputation here on the left. If you get offered a trade and you turn it down, it goes down. If you submit a trade and then you don't accept it, this goes down. But on the other hand, you complete a trade, that goes up. So what does this mean? There's a lot of things, and none of them are really good. I hate the new reputation system. It's poorly implemented. It's buggy as heck. I would recommend disabling it in most of your games unless you just want to fiddle around with it or something. But really, it's too easy to game. There's a lot of problems with it. It's messy. So, for example, let's just see some player here on the Orioles who's not going to be worth much. I think the easiest way to do that is probably go to prospects. Gene Mata. This guy is probably not going to cost us very much to acquire. He's an 18-year-old center fielder, no real potential. Okay, he's actually a little bit more expensive than I thought. Let's just say we want $1 from the Orioles. We just want to acquire $1 in cash. So we can make this work. It doesn't look like they're particularly willing to trade with us, but just for the sake of it, I'll deal them Bryce Jarvis. It's a starting pitcher, not too valuable, mediocre potential, not really likely to do anything. So you complete this trade, very minor deal, and look at that. My trade reputation went up. Now, on the other hand, you make a massive deal. Let's say we wanted to deal for Adley Rutschman. So let me just go back here. I think we'll deal for someone a little easier to get than Adley Rutschman. DL Hall, who we're going to get to this later on, but I think DL Hall is certainly one of the more valuable live players right now. So let's see what it would take to make this work. All right, Ryan Nelson, let's just throw him in for the heck of it. Now, obviously, this is a much bigger deal than the one that we just made, but we can still do it, and it still improves the trade reputation by the same amount. So what does this mean? Well, the higher trade reputation, the easier it is to make trades, the more likely the AI is to deal you for players at a slight discount. Now, it's not a big deal. It really does not do much, which is another thing that I think, why is this in the game in the first place? But you could just make a bunch of smaller trades to prepare yourself for bigger trades where you can then make them slightly easier, and there's no real downside to it. So it's kind of messy. The third thing, or not the third thing, the next thing about this is the AI. They offer you trades. Most of them suck. You decline that offer, you fail to respond, your trade reputation drops. Now, I've heard that this is a bug, not supposed to be intentional, but regardless, at the moment, that's ridiculously obnoxious. It's really dumb that you're getting punished for the AI's crappy offers. Trading reputation bar, just awful, should not be enabled in most games. My recommendation is turn it off. Like I said for hard mode earlier, that's worth having if you want to challenge the trade reputation. Doesn't really do anything. All right, next thing we're going to cover is the updated owner goals. And for the most part, I think this is a good change to the game. I just totally forgot I disabled them. So I'm going to go turn them back on. And now we're going to be able to see that it is quite different than in the past. So in previous games of OTP, normally you'd have like 3, maybe 4 owner goals at a time. They'd be pretty straightforward, relatively easy to complete most of the time. There was never really any pressure from your owner. It felt like you just could ignore your owner pretty much completely and you'd be totally fine. For the most part, goals were treated similarly in terms of how an owner values them. So what you're going to notice is a couple of new things. First of all, is the priority bar. This is basically denoting how much your owner's happiness with you is going to change depending on your ability to complete or not complete an owner goal. So we have here that improving our fan interest is a very high priority. So acquiring popular players, making sure that we're winning games to get that up, that's going to be a big deal. But on the other hand, we've got acquire a locally popular player, don't suck completely, and eventually reach the playoffs. Lower priorities. Now, these are obviously still good to meet, but they're not nearly as important as this. If we fail these goals, okay, sure, it's a little bit of a problem. He might get a little angry at us, but if we can't improve our fan interest at least a decent amount by 2025, we're likely getting in trouble with the owner. He might very well get a little bit angry. Now, next thing you're going to notice is that you have a status. So you can now discuss some owner goals and basically argue with your owner, I want this goal instead of what you gave me. So here you have the option to switch out the goal of acquiring a locally popular player for improving your staff cohesion. And you'll see that there's this duration number. This just means the number of years you have to do it. So this is probably a 1 year duration. You only get 1 year to improve your or acquire a locally popular player. So if you don't think you're going to be able to complete this goal, you can instead go for this goal of improving your staff cohesion. You get more time to do it. Obviously, it might be a little bit easier for you to do if this isn't possible. Now, obviously, acquiring a locally popular player is pretty easy, but under the circumstance where you do have a trait or an owner goal that's unreasonable or difficult and you have the ability to discuss it, that can be a valuable tool. So how does this work essentially? So you have the option to either accept, decline, or cancel here. Accepting the new goal means that this goal will replace this goal. You will not have the opportunity to negotiate another goal in all probability, but you will have your new goal. Hitting decline means that you're going to stick with the current goal over this. This goal will go away. There's a chance that you'll have another goal pop up, but there's no guarantees. On the other hand, cancel just closes it. Nothing happens. You're left with the option to discuss it later if you want, but yeah. So my thoughts on this new owner system. The priority, it's good. It adds a little bit more pressure on GMs. I feel like right now, once you get used to OTP, you're never going to get fired. It's just the point at which you have to struggle to get fired is really low, and almost any human GM, after learning how the game works and what makes a team effective in OTP, almost everyone is much better than the AI. Pretty much no matter the trade difficulty, always better at drafting, row 5, etc. So what this comes down to is just a little bit more pressure on some people potentially for completing owner goals, especially with tougher franchises. This might be an interesting dynamic. Now, on the other hand, the discuss. I don't love how it's implemented. It's better than not having it, but at the same time, I think that having a system where you get to negotiate what your goals are with your owner, like, okay, we need to improve the team, we need to make more money, etc. What's a realistic way to do it? We have these options to improve our money, so we could long term potentially improve our fan interest, improve our market size, or increase our finances by this much by this date, or acquire a popular player. Or for winning, okay, well, we can either try to be 500 team this year or we could be a playoff team this year. GM, what do you think is more realistic? Rather than just a random goal popping up if you want to discuss changing your goal pretty much. And only for certain goals, only after they're issued. It's a fine system, but it could be better. Maybe we'll see some more improvements to this down the line that make the owner goal system potentially more dynamic, more interactive, more critical to your actual success. Next thing. So improved in-game statistics. So OOTP hyped up in the trailer that they were bringing StatCast to the game. So there's launch angle, in-game, catch probability, that kind of stuff. Purely cosmetic. Other than maybe the catch difficulty. That may have some statistical use because defense is just so funky in OTP, but I cannot stress enough that if anything, this is a bad addition because it could throw people off and make people think that StatCast is used in the engine. That's not how it works. The engine is very simplistic. You go to a player, you do not see, for example, barrel rate um, or whiff rate or anything like that. You simply see their contact, gap power, home run power, eye, and avoid Ks. For hitters, this breaks down to 5 very simple ratings that loosely translates to your batting average, your doubles and triples, your home runs, your walks, and your strikeouts. For pitchers, you basically have stuff, movement, and control. There's now the new pitcher map, but I'm going to ignore that for now. Stuff, movement, and control loosely translates to strikeout rate, walk rate, and home run rate. This is a very 2000s, not 2010s, not StatCast era. This is a more Moneyball era game engine. It functions under the assumptions that it's very straightforward, to put it more simply. Essentially, the StatCast doesn't actually affect anything. They've had StatCast numbers before, so this is a purely visual element designed to hype the game up. StatCast is not an OOTP. It's not coming to OOTP, at least for a very long time. Don't count on it. Yeah, I don't like it, but it's here. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss the new financial changes to this game. So something you can do that the first thing that we're going to discuss here is the new contract negotiation system. I like this. I think this is a really good addition to the game. So in the past, you would have, first of all, 15 years instead of 10 years. This is a really good and really needed addition. These long-term contracts, especially to the superstar young players, are becoming more and more common. So extending it to 15 years really is the minimum. I'd hope to see 20 years in the near future. I don't think we will, but not that I would ever really give more than the 15-year contract anyway. Just it should be in the game because it's realistically what's going on in the MLB. So nice addition. Good job, OTP. I applaud you for extending the maximum contract length. Okay, so let's say we want to give Gabriel Moreno an 11-year contract extension. Well, in the past, you would have to kind of guess what a player wants for a long-term contract if they're only asking for a short-term contract. So he only wanted a 1-year deal. In the past, in 23 previous games, we wouldn't know what money it would take to get him to sign a long-term extension. You kind of have to take a shot in the dark. Then he says no. You offer him a little more. He says no again, and then you keep going until he takes the deal. But now you can just click this apply long-term demand button, and this will roughly tell you what the player wants for the number of years that you've given them. So this would be Gabriel Moreno's demand for an 11-year contract. So buying out some pre-arbitration, some arbitration, and a lot of free agency. Otherwise, contracts are pretty much the same, but I think this is a really amazing quality of life feature. The apply long-term demand, in my opinion, this might be the single best change to OETP. It's certainly up there. In 24, the apply long-term demand is a really nice addition to the game. Now, for my issue with this, finances are kind of broken right now in OETP. They it might be a result of them increasing the maximum contract length. They've clearly been messing around with some other stuff as well. Not that I'm really exactly sure what, um, but absolutely, Gabriel Moreno wants too much money here. This is not equivalent to his actual value. You could probably sign him for a little less, but you see this with a lot of players. You'll see some garbage players want really high long-term demand value, and then you'll see some good players with lower demand. So let's just check Alec Thomas versus Gabriel Moreno. I'd say Alec Thomas is probably a slightly better player. He wants about 2 million a year less. I think he's got slightly more service time than Moreno, maybe, yeah, a little bit more service time. So yeah, it's really kind of funky. The further in you go to a game, the more you see it. Let's just take a look at Brandon Pfaadt because I think he's potentially actually the best Diamondbacks prospect outside of Corbin Carroll in OTP right now. So if we wanted to give him, let's say, a 9-year contract extension, he'd be significantly cheaper, only about 10 million a year versus Thomas and Moreno, and he's certainly a better player. So yeah, this is just kind of the new thing. Contract demands are funky, but it goes beyond that. The way the AI handles contracts is even worse. You're going to see a lot of the AI just severely undervaluing certain players because of their contracts or not taking into account certain contracts that it probably should. So I'm just going to real quick free up some contract space so I can demonstrate this a little bit better in a couple of specific examples and then get right back here. All right, I'm actually going to unpause this right here and just show this trade-off real quick. This is a symptom of something I'm going to get into later, but essentially this trade is just ridiculously one-sided. We've got Ketel Marte, who's obviously a good player, but not a great player so much, and obviously on a little bit of a contract, Dominic Fletcher, who's a solid center fielder, I will admit, but obviously not that great, and Jake McCarthy, who's pretty much just a decent corner outfielder. In return, getting Matt Brash, who's one of the best starting pitchers in OTP right now. The game doesn't recognize this at all. Andres Munoz, who is one of the best relief pitchers in OTP right now on a ridiculously affordable contract. Bryce Miller, who's a solid starting pitcher prospect. And then money. So, yeah, this trade is just obviously very one-sided. And I'll get into more of this later, but anyways, just freeing up a little bit of cap space, and then we'll get into the next bit. All right, this trade is ultimately one of the greatest symptoms of what is wrong with OTP finances right now. The game just does not think, it thinks that the moment a reliever has a big contract, they are garbage. This is obviously not true. Edwin Diaz, yeah, he's hurt, but he's easily worth, or at least close to worth, the $20 million he's getting paid right now. And not only is the game willing to give you Edwin Diaz, and also grab two of the Mets' top prospects, Brett Baty, excellent first base prospect, really more than third base, and Alex Ramirez, a great corner outfield prospect, and I'm really not giving up very much. AJ Vukovic is pretty much just a worse Brett Baty. And John Del Gustave is literally depth reliever. So trades like this, guys like Edwin Diaz, Ryan Presley, Raisel Iglesias, pretty much anyone, elite relievers on bigger contracts, excellent value to trade for at the moment, ridiculous value to some extent to trade for at the moment. This is also true of one particular starting pitcher that I don't really get, the Detroit Tigers. It is which pitcher? I'm blanking right now. Eduardo Rodriguez. He is a pretty good, like middle rotation, upper middle rotation type starting pitcher. He's only making 14 million a year. That's pretty reasonable. He's gotten opt out, and there's a decent chance he takes it. I think he's garbage. You can probably get some decent players. I bet I could get Spencer Torkelson for absolutely nothing here. He's pretty much just a solid first baseman. Yeah, literally can get Torkelson for free along with Eduardo Rodriguez because they just do not value him. So finances very out of whack right now. Don't know exactly what's going on. Hope it gets fixed. One other thing about finances that I am actually happy about, you now have cash available equals your budget space. This is good. This needed to be a thing. Um, it makes no sense that you couldn't just trade spare budget space because that's the same thing as cash on hand in real life. So glad that they changed that. Very welcome. Appreciate it. It does kind of change up later, but for the most part, that's how it works. And obviously, a good thing. Now, next thing that I want to talk about is trade AI changes. And I kind of dived into this a little bit earlier. But the first thing that I want to point out here is that there is no limit to how many players you can add to a trade now. So before that, you could only have 5 players on each side, but now you could throw everybody pretty much if you want to. Okay, no, my bad. So it's a 10 player limit, but that's still more than you could likely ever hit. So that cap booster, really big deal. Kind of needed to happen. Glad that they made that change. And very nice quality of life thing. Now, on the other hand, oh, and by the way, I should mention this because it is important. I'm not playing at a low trade difficulty. I'm playing at the default trade difficulty, which is now 2 ticks. Actually, I guess they increased the number of trade difficulty options, so that's 4 ticks above average. That's equivalent to 2 ticks above average in previous games. That's 5 ticks from the maximum trade difficulty. Okay. But essentially what I'm getting at here, trade difficulty is way down from the past. As you've seen with the trades I've made so far, really easy to get some absolutely ridiculous deals done at this point. The trade AI has never been weaker, dating back to when I first started playing in 20. Now that is probably partially because I've gotten better at trading since then, but I imagine it's certainly weaker than 22, 23, 21. It makes no sense that it's like this, but the trade AI just down significantly. Anyways, another thing that I've noticed about the trade AI, this isn't really something I can show right now, but TCR is bigger than ever so far from what I've seen in 24. You can players, let's say like Patrick Sandoval, he just goes from what he is now, which is a pretty good starting pitcher. Let's say he adds 10 points of stuff, 5 points each of movement and control. Now he's one of the best starting pitchers at OOTP. The game does not recognize that immediately. They would still treat him as a middle rotation type starting pitcher in trades. He would be reasonably cheap to acquire, and then he's going to be absolutely dominant in your rotation. His contract demand, by the way, going to be really cheap too when you acquire him. So because of this, it's easier than ever in OOTP to build a really cheap, really dominant team. Yeah, it's kind of a mess, the trade AI right now, the financial logic, the whole thing's it's never been this weak. I don't know why it's acting the way it is, but hopefully it gets patched at some point in the near future. But right now, it's almost a crippling issue with the game that makes it, I wouldn't say quite unplayable for me, but it's it's not really enjoyable because it's such a problem. You, I think, have to almost crank TCR down just to prevent this issue from popping up in the first place. You almost have to really bump up your trade difficulty just to prevent it from being over the top easy to build a dominant team. Yeah, it's kind of messy. The next thing I want to cover is the AI's Rule 5 and roster lot. And yeah, roster logic. This I'll cover more when I actually sim ahead to Rule 5, but essentially what happens here is that the AI is really bad about leaving upper tier prospects unprotected for the Rule 5 draft. So, for example, the Cubs have in their organization, I believe his name is Kevin Alcantara, pretty solid outfield prospect. He's got 55 contact, gap power, 65 power, good corner outfield defense. 20 years old, not even 21 yet. Solid base running. This is a quality prospect. He gets left unprotected in Rule 5 very very frequently so far from what I've seen. 2 out of 3 times he has been unprotected. I believe the one time he was protected, he got traded. So yeah, it the AI has got reverted to its worst stages in terms of leaving prospects unprotected in Rule 5. It's been a while since I've seen a prospect of Alcantara's caliber consistently left unprotected. I don't know what's going on, but this has got to be patched. I am not kidding when I say that if you set up a fictional game or sim out 10 years or something, it would be very possible to build a competitive team. Certainly a team of all high-end prospects just from the Rule 5. AI, it's not doing a good job. With roster decisions, it's similarly making bad choices. It's benching guys who should be obvious starters, starting guys who shouldn't even be on the major league roster at times. These things are way worse than they've ever been. OTP consistently improves for the most part. Its AI over the years, every game you can see throughout the game cycle, it gets better. Game to game, you see big jumps. 24 giant step backwards. I don't know what happened. I don't know what they tweaked. I don't know if this is intentional. From some of the things I've heard, this, for all reasonable assumptions, could have been done on purpose, which would be really terrifying because this is not the direction you want OTP to go. This is a giant step backwards. Please, devs, please fix the AI. It's been good before. You can make it good again. I believe in you. And I will certainly be watching for improvements to this to get at least back to where we were in 23, maybe better throughout the cycle. This is not something I would say is a super hardcore panic mode right now. I think that it's certainly very worrying that it's so bad, but I trust them to be able to make changes because history has shown that the AI generally gets better. And the last thing I want to cover before we go sim ahead and get to periods of the year where I can cover some other stuff are bugs and crashes. Don't love it. I've never had issues with crashes in OOTP before. And I've had 24 crash on me at least twice. There was one time that I kind of froze up. Didn't give it a chance to unfreeze, but once, right after I won a World Series, crashed, lost the entire playoffs. That was kind of brutal. It was the second year of that save, so it's not like I was an ultra juggernaut yet, guaranteed to win the World Series. Yeah, I've never, like I said, I've never had bugs or crashes rather in OOTP before, so this is totally new to me. Really unfortunate. Bugs, I've mentioned some, like the trade offers getting rejected, damaging your reputation. it's to be expected at this point in the cycle. They don't really publicly test it. You get 3 days of a public test. They don't have time to patch much up in the beta there. So it is what it is. I expect the bugs will get fixed, the crashes will get fixed. Now, there's actually one last thing I want to cover here, and that is the automatic data dumps under database. Or excuse me, not under database. Almanac. It's under Almanac. So this opens up a whole new level of possibilities in terms of potential automation with data management. So you can now do monthly dumps of data to CSV files, and yearly dumps, of course, which is a really big deal. I'm going to be able to do some interesting things with this potentially going forwards throughout the cycle. So we'll see. Anyways, I'm going to sim ahead and then we'll take a look at, I believe the trade deadline is the first thing coming up. All right, we're here at the first year player draft, and there's actually a couple of things that I want to point out here before we continue ahead to the trade deadline. So the first thing is that player development and amateur player generation has changed significantly in 24. First thing you're going to notice is that the draft class is a whole lot better. I, in my first game, was able to quite easily actually draft decent quality talent all the way through the 20th and final round of the draft. So makes things certainly quite interesting throughout the whole draft. And obviously, a lot of really interesting talent means that there will be a little bit of a power creep over time. You're going to see the same thing with the international amateurs. The high end talent is just really crazy at times. So, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the draft, it makes things more fun, it makes things deeper, but something to keep an eye on, as there is likely to be at least a little bit of that power creep as you get into your saves, especially if you have a quality development staff. AI, not smart at drafting either. But anyways, yeah, with that said, I'm going to continue on ahead to the first year, or the trade deadline rather, but I want to quickly just point out Matt Brash on pace for 5 WAR. This is about right for him. Andres Munoz on pace for about 1 WAR, having a really good season as the closer. I'm not controlling this team manually. I have not optimized anything. Just saying, trade AI. Just saying. All right, here we are at deadline day. So essentially, how this works is not that much different from normal trading. You're offered trades. You have time to respond to them. You respond to them, and then it's pretty much just like getting normal trade offers from the AI. You can take a look at the trade block. You can make offers for players. So let's say, for example, I need a corner outfielder. Let's try to see what it would cost to get Raimel Tapia. I can send over Blake Walston. I can send over Dax Fulton, who I picked up midseason and is very good, so I'm not going to trade him. But Yoasmer Alvarez seems like a player I can certainly afford to give up. He's not that great. Let's go ahead and get Raimel Tapia. Complete trade. Wow, it works just like any other trade. So yeah, there's a fancy new system. You get however you set it up, but essentially it's just a lot of trade offers from the AI in a mini game like setting, but it functions the same as trading normally, so it's interesting, I guess. I guess some people might use it, but really for me, I do my trades during the season. I don't rush to get them all done at the deadline. So I don't see this trade deadline thing. It takes time too. I don't really want to spend extra time, especially to consolidate all of my trading into one period when I can just do it throughout the season. So I don't think this is going to be a big deal at all for me. I don't think I'm ever going to use it, but I guess it's a nice little fun addition for some people. If you enjoy it, that's good. But like I said, I'm not going to do it. So anyways, I'm just going to sim ahead to the International Amateur, the beginning of the period, and I'll explain the whole thing because I don't really want to go through the whole thing, and there's no need to anyways. But once we do that, that should be the last thing to cover today. All right, the International Amateur Pool has been revealed. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the International Amateur Free Agents screen and quickly explain this new system. So essentially, you have your players. That's nothing new. It's the same as previous years. There's a lot more though. Instead of in the past there being, I think, 30 by default, 60 is more, 120 is the most. There's now 120 by default, and you can go up from there. So the talent of these players is about on par with last year, probably a little higher than that, maybe. Probably because of the larger number of players more than anything. But essentially, the biggest thing here is the changes to the system as it works. So let's look at this guy, Ernesto Estrada. This guy is a big potential starting pitcher. He's not bad developed. He's got a lot of stamina. So he's obviously a very good player. Now in the past, his demand probably like $7.5 million. He's probably going to cost you more like $3-4 million. This system works much more like in real life, where you sign a larger number of players under the cap rather than just signing one guy for the entire cap, unless it's a super talented player. But you can do that as well if you want. So yeah, look at this demands. This super pitcher is $2.2 million demand. The guy above him, who's also a very good starting pitcher, $700,000 starting demand. So it's going to go up, but the AI is not going to overpay for them either. There's a lot of players. You're going to end up being able to sign a lot of good talent every year. So what you can do is you can, in addition to the changes to, of course, the basic system itself, let me quickly go to my scouting screen here. Oh, right, I've disabled scouting. So I guess the workouts would not be enabled unless you have the scouting system enabled. So I want to enable scouting for the sake of being able to do this. So you go to your international page, and then you can invite up to 10 players to a workout. So you just essentially right click on them. Under the delete player button is invite to training, and you can see them. So how this system works, in short, you get better scouting accuracy on the players, and then you build your relationship with those players. So let's say I really like the starting pitcher that we were just talking about. I absolutely want him in here. So I want my relationship with him to go up as much as possible. So I'm going to run my scouting practice once a month. And you have to make sure you do it once a month until the sign period starts, beginning in obviously October. And I'm going to make sure I can build my relationship up with him as much as possible. That way he'll favor my offers a little more. I can get him cheaper. My scouting accuracy goes up by 1 degree every time I run a practice, with every player in the practice as well. League interest tells you how much other players are inviting these guys to practice, how much they're being scouted, what the odds are that you're going to have competing interests on these guys. Now, big thing about international amateurs that I don't like, the system has improved dramatically in terms of being more similar to MLB. However, it's still OOTP, and at its most basic level, the players generated are still the same. Last year, they did a good job making sure that not every prospect develops fully. Players bust sometimes, guys lose potential, guys gain potential, so it functions a little more like real life, but you can still build a super powered development system with all the best coaches and full player development budget, and you're going to crank out most of your prospects at a really high rate of success. So this Ernesto Estrada guy with massive potential, odds are he's going to at least have a good shot at reaching his full potential if I'm building my farm system well. And I obviously intend to do this for him. So now I've got a super prospect who's going to cost me only a couple $1 million. I don't really have to compete with other teams. That's the big problem with the international amateurs. In real life, the international amateurs, they get rated maybe like a 55, 60, the best of them on most of their tools. And then they happen, once they reach the States, you get a better idea of what their potential really is. Then you can start ranking them among the better prospects. But except in very rare cases like Yasan Dominguez, you really can't say that international amateur from the moment that he signs is going to be a super prospect. And even guys like Yasan Dominguez, Marco Luciano, Wander Franco, maybe with the exception of Wander Franco, they don't tend to live up to their hype. It's guys like Juan Soto, who are international amateurs that then explode later on that nobody saw coming. Those are the guys that you really see. It's just a guessing game for the most part. Guys like Jazz Chisholm, he was unheralded signing by the D-backs. Then he turned into a super trade chip, got dealt one of the biggest trades in recent history, 1-for-1 for the ace of the D-backs, and is a big piece of the Marlins these days. Yeah, that's the big thing. I know it's obviously really valuable in real life, but the value of it in OOTP is just off the rails ridiculous. You're more guaranteed to have your players develop, and yeah. So I'm sure that there will be tweaks to player development over the cycle, but we'll see, and it is definitely very powerful. Anyways, my plans for the future. So right now I am working on setting MOPS 2.0 up to be usable on 23 so I can get a basic run through of players, see how the environment looks, what's different from, or on 24 rather, what's different from 23, and give you guys a rundown like I did last year of some early cycle changes that you can see from 23. I also intend to begin releasing tutorials. They will probably be at a lower rate than when I released them a lot on the 22 cycle, but I do intend to start doing it again and getting that out. MOPS 2.0, like I said, I'm aiming for a summer release that is subject to change. I will have updates. I hope that in a couple of weeks, or a few weeks, I should say several weeks, I will have at least a preview ready so that I can show some features off that might be included before we get to the full release later down the line. But in the meantime, you guys, I hope that this video is helpful for you running down some of the new features. And yeah, one last thing that I want to say before I end this video, Perfect Team. I have not talked about Perfect Team in a long time for a number of reasons. I just want to say that for those of you who are like me, Perfect Team, as it existed in 21, 22, was a game that you could be competitive on your raw skill, raw talent as a free to play player. It was possible at that time to really ride knowledge of the game to great success. Perfect Team 24 has killed that completely. If you are looking to be a data person in Perfect Team and hoping to be successful in league play, that's not going to happen. They butchered tournaments. They've added a number of features that makes it much more difficult to win without paying, and of course incentivize paying. So it's disappointing, but obviously it is what it is. It's Perfect Team. It's always been designed as a moneymaker. What it was in 21, 22 was never going to be the sustainable thing. For those of you who want PT help, I'm not going to be doing any of that. I didn't play PT 23, and I'm not going to be playing PT 24. I'll probably never play PT again. But I'm sure there's a number of people out there who are more than happy to help you. There are people in my Discord who are more than happy to share their insights, share their data. Kidneys is obviously a great source for those of you who follow him. And anything else, yeah, it is what it is. It's Perfect Team. I don't have to play it, so I won't play it, and that's really all there is to it. But I do obviously still hope to adapt MOPS to be usable on Perfect Team. I hope to adapt it to be versatile enough to use anywhere. Anyways, you guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for your continued support despite my obviously long absence. And I will see you on my next video, hopefully coming out later this week.